Scary Movie from 2000 is the start of a legendary franchise of horror parody movies, which I have watched all 5 of them now. I watched Scary Movie 2 on my VHS copy, and that was my VHS watch for this week. And it was quite a nice break after going through 2 horror franchises to go through a comedy franchise that is also horror related. Now, there is a bit of a controversy about the history of these movies and the production of them and how it moved away from the Wayans brothers between the second and third movie. I'm aware of all that, but I'm going to try not to get into it and just review the series objectively. The first movie is mostly a parody of Scream, though it brings in elements from other movies such as I Know What You Did Last Summer. And watching it in 2025, I actually think the first movie is a little bit rough around the edges, but there are still some hilarious and iconic moments. It's funny to think that the "What's Up" section is probably more known as something from Scary Movie when that was actually a parody of a beer commercial from back in the day. With the second movie, they upped the ante with the special effects and they went more for a haunted house kind of movie, and this is the one that features Chris Elliott with his tiny hand and David Cross in a wheelchair, and that's just scratching the surface of how politically incorrect and potentially offensive those first 2 movies are in the best way. Now in 3 and 4 they were parodying different movies, and they retained Anna Faris for those 2 movies, and they brought in Simon Rex and a few other notable cast members, especially Leslie Nielsen as the President of the United States. And though a lot of people don't like these movies as much because they're not as edgy as the Wayans movies, I enjoyed them quite a bit just because of their production value and the source material that they chose to parody. So in the third movie, it's The Ring meets Signs, and in the fourth movie, it's War of the Worlds meets The Grudge, of course, with a whole bunch of other stuff thrown in as well. The fifth movie, unfortunately, is its own thing entirely. The only thing familiar in this movie is Simon Rex. The female lead is played by Ashley Tisdale, who I am a fan of, and she's fine in this movie. It's just not a good movie at all. It's really only about an hour long, and then there's a 10 to 15 minute blooper reel while the credits are playing, and then the credits, so it barely qualifies as a feature-length movie. It leans a lot more on the cameos, some of which are funny, but in general I think Scary Movie 5 has earned its reputation as a complete dud. So yeah, I had a lot of fun going back through this series. I think the second and third movies are my favorites, and I recommend them to anybody looking for some politically incorrect humor from the good old days. Werewolves Within from 2021 is a horror comedy about a park ranger who teams up with a letter carrier to solve the mystery of who killed the dog belonging to one of the locals, as well as navigating the implications of an oil pipeline being run through the town, where the developer proposing the pipeline is one of the characters in the movie. This one definitely had its moments, and my wife enjoyed this movie. This was actually the second time she had seen it, but all in all, this really wasn't up my alley. I didn't really like any of the characters. They all acted in strange ways, even when it didn't make sense to the story, and they were all kind of annoying. Unlike the Scary Movie franchise, this movie also leans into corporate, politically correct language, which is something that I find usually only exists on the internet, and real people don't talk that way, so when I see it in a movie, it's a little bit off-putting. I think a lot of people will get some enjoyment out of this movie, but I thought it was just kind of whack. Drive My Car from 2021 is a drama directed by Ryusuke Hamaguchi and based on a short story by Haruki Murakami. I bought this one a while back on a Criterion sale, not really knowing too much about it, except for that it was a critically acclaimed Japanese movie, which is usually enough to sell me. But it sat on my shelf for a while because of its intimidating 3-hour runtime. Now, I have no problem with movies with long runtimes. I just choose to watch them sparingly because I prefer 90-minute or 2-hour movies. But I had a day off and decided to to dive into this one. I was thrilled when I saw that it was based on a Murakami short story because I'm a huge fan of him as an author, and I settled in for what turned out to be a wonderful, life-affirming, very moving and emotional movie. The movie is about a man and his wife who are writers, and when the wife dies, the man immerses himself in his work as a director of a play where the production company forces him to use a hired driver rather than driving himself to rehearsals. His preference is to drive himself so he can memorize the lines during the car ride. And throughout the story, we get to see his interactions with other characters, some from his past and some with deeper connections than he realizes, as he navigates the grief for his wife and his prospects for his own life and mortality. Now, I guess my biggest warning with this movie is that it's called Drive My Car. It's not called Drive, and it's not called Baby Driver. This is not an exciting movie. It's very calm and slow. Nobody so much as raises their voice in this entire movie. I unfortunately have seen people call this movie boring. I was completely bought into this movie start to finish. There are so many interesting things going on, including the play that our main character is directing, in which characters are speaking different languages to each other, including sign language, which is used to a real magical effect in a scene towards the end of the movie. So if you're willing to commit to a rather lengthy movie that is more meditative and introspective than explosive and loud and exciting, then you might want to come out of your comfort zone and check out Drive My Car. The Raid from 2011 and its sequel, The Raid 2 from 2014, are explosive and exciting and packed with action. These are action movies from Indonesia directed by Gareth Evans and starring Iko Uwais as a rookie cop who in the first movie is part of a type of SWAT team that is doing a raid on a apartment building to take down a crime lord. But right off the bat we realize that all is not what it seems. The second movie is a direct continuation which picks up right where the first film leaves off, but is a different kind of movie entirely. Where the first movie has a simple story and focuses on wall-to-wall action, the second one goes way deeper into character drama, the inner machinations of the crime underworld, and has way more colorful characters. The jump from the first movie to the second movie reminds me of Terrifier 1 and 2, where the first movie is great, but it feels in comparison to the second movie more like a proof of concept or tech demo. The martial arts action in these movies is like nothing you will see anywhere else. Every punch and kick looks and feels like it's actually happening. And where the first movie takes place all in that one building, the second movie goes even bigger with car chases and a prison riot and all kinds of crazy stuff that justifies its longer runtime. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Julie Estelle as Hammer Girl in the second movie. When I saw her in The Night Comes for Us a few years ago, I knew I would have to see more of her films, and this is one of her most famous performances because it's one of her first action scenes where she was previously more of a dramatic actress. And in one of the most iconic sequences from the second movie, Hammer Girl and her brother, Baseball Bat Boy, completely knock it out of the park, no pun intended, where I felt myself getting almost emotional at the performance. And like everything else in this movie, I love how that scene made the hammers feel real. You really wouldn't want to mess with somebody wielding two hammers, and I feel like this is the first movie I've ever seen that really does a hammer attack justice. Both of these movies are incredible. I can't really recommend them highly enough if you like action films. The Raid 2 especially pretty much surpasses anything I've seen in the action genre from any era or any other part of the world. As a side note, I will say I have the Blu-rays for both of these movies, and Gareth Evans gives some of the best director's commentaries I've ever heard on a DVD or Blu-ray. You can tell he has a passion for making films. He's a real nerd about movies. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that he is heavily influenced by horror. So not only are these movies very hard-hitting, they're also very gory in parts. He talks a lot about his characters having depth that is not shown on screen. So while I know it probably will never happen, I would love to see a movie about just Hammer Girl and Baseball Bat Boy. And I think that will do it for another episode. Thank you for making it to the end. And if you like these videos, I have a whole playlist of them on my channel. I do this every week, so I'll see you next time.